Good afternoon, greetings and welcome. それでは皆様、ただいまより東京都立大学グローバル教養講座特別編を開催いたします。本日司会を務めさせていただくのは私、ハリー杉山と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。Thank you. ありがとうございます。さて、グローバル教養講座は東京都立大学の学生を中心に講座を通じて分離を問わず豊かな国際感覚やグローバルな視点を育み、国際社会で活躍できる人材の育成を目的としたさまざまな分野で国際的に活躍する第一人者が講師を務める特別講座です。これまでには台湾の天才 IT 担当大臣と呼ばれるオードリー・タン氏やフランス最大の知性と呼ばれる歴史学者、社会人類学者のエマニュエル・トッド氏、さらに私も参加させていただきましたユバルノア・ハラリ教授と小池東京都知事による特別対談などそうそうたる顔ぶれの講座をオンライン配信してきました。そこで今回はついにグローバル教養講座初の対面開催でカーボンニュートラルをテーマに講演を進めていきたいと思います。パネリストとしてかねてより環境先進国と称され多くの取り組みを進めているノルウェー王国、さらに産油国の中でいち早くエネルギー転換の戦略を打ち出し国家的なプロジェクトを進めているアラブ首長国連邦より駐日大使閣下ご本人にお越しいただき東京都立大学の教員とともにお話を伺っていきます。本日の講座が世界的な課題となっている環境問題を今までよりもぜひ身近により深く考えていただける機会になれば幸いです。それではこれより本日ご登壇いただく皆様のご紹介をさせていただきます。まずはじめに駐日ノルウェー特命全権大使であるインガ・ニーハマル閣下です。ニーハマル大使は1991年にノルウェー外務省入省以来安全保障政策と二国間の関係を中心に幅広い外交分野に携わってきました。2019年9月より駐日特命全権大使を務められていらっしゃいます。続いては駐日アラブ首長国連邦特命全権大使であるシュハブ・アル・ファヒーム閣下です。アル・ファヒーム大使はアブダビ国営石油会社アブダビイスラミック銀行などの勤務を経て2012年に外務国際協力省に入省、2021年3月より駐日特命全権大使を務めていらっしゃいます。そして最後には東京都立大学都市環境学部都市政策科学科の奥真美教授です。奥教授は環境マネジメントシステム、気象変動対策、環境規制、政策処方、環境法政策、まちづくりなど今我々がまさに立ち向かわなきゃいけない環境問題に関わる法政策を主に研究されています。それではこれより講師の方々による講義パートに移ってまいります。各国の概要、そして環境施策についてそれぞれご紹介いただきます。ではまず導入として日本、東京を取り巻く現状、そして取り組みについて解説していきます。東京都立大学都市環境学部都市政策科学科奥真美教授よりカーボンニュートラル実現に向けた日本および東京における取り組み、そして私たちにできることご紹介いただきます。それでは奥教授、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。皆様拍手でお迎えくださいませ。
皆様こんにちは。ただいまご紹介に預かりました東京都立大学の奥でございます。まだ授業はマスクをして講義をしているのですけれども、今日は皆様の前で久しぶりにマスクを取ってお話をするということで、ちょっと恥ずかしい気持ちがしております。私からはですね、まずカーボンニュートラルに向けて、なぜそれがそもそも必要なのかというその背景、それから日本と、東京の取り組み、そして、私たち一人一人ができること、そういうことにつきまして簡単に15分程度ですけれどもお話をさせていただきます。 こちらのスライドをご覧いただきますと、特に1850年以降、急激に気温が上昇しているということがわかります。その原因は、こちらの右のグラフを見ていただきますと、この下のフラットな、ほぼフラットな線はですね、自然の起源のみを考慮した場合の気温上昇、気温の変化ですね、上昇というか気温の変化を示したものですけれども、そこに人為的な影響を加えますと、このように気温が急激に上昇しているということがわかります。つまり今起こっている地球規模での気温上昇というのは人為的な影響によるものだということが科学的に分かっているわけです。そして気温が上昇するということがどのような影響をもたらすのかということですけれども、地球の温度が上がると様々な気候に変化をもたらす要因が生まれまして、そしてそれによってここにあるような、私たちの社会経済活動全般に及ぶような、そして直接生活や健康に影響を及ぼすような様々なマイナス現象というものが顕在化してくるということなんですね。そしてこの気候変動の問題に取り組むということは、ひいては SDGs、2030年の持続可能な開発目標、その解決にも資するということにつながっていきます。これは昨年世界全体で確認されている様々な気象現象に伴う影響、被害をその一部を表したものになります。皆さんも年々どうもこれまでと違うような極端な気象現象が頻繁に起こってるなということを感じていらっしゃいませんか？洪水が至るところで起こったり、それによって人的物的な被害がたくさん出るようになっています。で、そうした現象が世界各地でも観測されています。そういうことがありまして、国際的な交渉、国際的な話し合いの結果としてパリ協定というものが、これは2015年に採択された、ところですけれども、このパリ協定では、この A のところに書いてありますが、赤字で書いてあるように、2度より、これ、産業革命前からの地球平均気温上昇を2度より十分下方に保持するんだと。そしてできるだけ 1.5 度に抑える努力を追求していこうということが、国際的に2015年の時点では合意されたところです。そして2018年に IPCC、これは気候変動に関わる政府間パネルという、科学者が各国政府に対して政策決定、意思決定をする際の科学的な知見をインプットするために報告書を定期的にまとめて出しているのですけれども、こちらは特別報告書と言いまして、その定期的に出してきたものとはまた別にですね、1.5 度特別報告書というのを2018年に出しています。で、その中では、これまで、パリ協定の下では2度よりも下にできるだけ2度まで気温上昇を抑えましょうということでは合意していたのですけれども、2度ではこれは十分ではないんだと。1.5 度に抑えないと、もはや地球は、成り立たないと言いますか、もう 1.5 度を超えるような気温上昇になってしまいますと、もうこれは、人類にとっても不可逆的なそういうリスクというものが顕在化してしまうんだということを示した報告書です。ここを見ていただきますと、1.5 度と2度、たった 0.5 度の違いというふうに思われるかもしれませんが、この 0.5 度の違いが非常に大きなインパクトの違いをもたらすということがわかります。例えば少なくとも5年に1回深刻な熱波を被る世界人口の割合も2度ですと 37% ですけれども、 1.5 度であればその半分以下に抑えることができるとかですね。北極に海氷のない夏も2度ですと10年に1度ですけれども、 1.5 度に抑えれば100年に1度に 抑えられると。この 0.5 度の違いがこんなに大きいんだということを世界に知らしめ、非常に世界も大きな衝撃を持ってこの報告書を受け止めたわけです。で、そうしたこともありまして、2021年ですけれども、イギリスのグラスゴーで開催されて合意された、このグラスゴー気候合意という中では、世界全体で 1.5 度目標を目指すと、ここに、合意したというところが非常に大きな、成果として、指摘することができます。ちょっと前のスライドに戻りますが、この 1.5 度に抑えるという、そのためには2050年頃に CO2 排出量は実質ゼロにしないといけないですね。ということが、これも、この IPCC 報告書、特別報告書で示されたところです。ちょっとこちら飛ばしますね。で、そういったその科学的な知見を踏まえて、もう今世界の潮流は2050年には脱炭素、つまりカーボンニュートラル、これを実現しないといけないんだという、そういったその共通認識が、持たれているというところになります。で、そこで、世界中の国々、多くの国々が、2050年カーボンニュートラルを表明し、それに向けての戦略を策定し、取り組み、歩みを進めていると、そういう状況にあります。これ、2021年4月末現在で経産省が、日本の経済産業省がまとめた資料なのですが、申し訳ありません。ノルウェーと UAE、色がついてませんけれども、しかしもう両国とも2050年カーボンニュートラルしっかりと表明されて歩み始めていらっしゃいますので、ここはちょっと資料の訂正をしておきたいと思います。で、それと同時にですね、国だけではなくって、いわゆるノンステートアクターと言われる、非国家組織とか非国家主体ですね。例えば都市だとか、コミュニティだとか、それから企業、投資家、それから教育機関といったようなところも、数多くの、ところが、この Race to Zero キャンペーンという、これ国連が主導して行っているキャンペーンですが、そこに賛同し、そしてカーボンニュートラルに向けた取り組みを進めているという状況がございます。で、中でも、やはりそのエネルギー消費量も大きい、人口規模も大きい都市が、Cities Race to Zero キャンペーンというのを展開しておりまして、特に大都市を中心として多くの都市が脱炭素に向けて取り組みを進めています。日本におきましてもご存知のように2020年に当時の首相が2050年カーボンニュートラル宣言をして以降、非常に急速に法律の改正ですとか、ロードマップや計画の改定などを進めまして、日本も世界と同じように歩調を合わせて2050年にはカーボンニュートラルを実現するんだということで取り組みを進めています。従来は2050年までに 80% 削減、これ2013年度比ですけれども、と言っていたところをゼロにすると。で、その途中の2030年の時点では 46% 削減するということを、これは世界に対しても日本として宣言しているところでございます。で、その際に、日本の特徴として言えると思うんですけれども、この地球温暖化対策推進法っていう法律が日本にありまして、この中では特に地方公共団体の役割が大きく、地方公共団体の役割に期待されているところが大きいですね。地方公共団体に気候変動、特に地球温暖化に関わる実行計画というものを作ってもらって、で、その中に温室効果ガスの削減目標とか、それから再生可能エネルギーの導入目標っていうのを具体的に盛り込んでください。で、それを実現するための施策とともに、そういった施策が地域にとってもメリットになるような、そういう内容を盛り込んでくださいということを地方公共団体に求めています。なので、地方公共団体の役割、地域の役割、そこに日本の 気候変動政策って大きく期待しているところがあるんですね。この辺はちょっと飛ばしますね。そして、今の話との関連で言いますと、地域脱炭素ロードマップというのを、これは国と、一部の地方公共団体が入って一緒に策定したのですが、その中に2030年度までに少なくとも100カ所の脱炭素先行地域、いわゆるモデル地域を作りまして、でそこでの取り組みを踏まえて、他の地域にもいわゆる脱炭素ドミノを起こすんだと。他の地域にも同様の取り組みを水平展開していって、日本全体で脱炭素を実現するんだというようなことをやっています。ここは、そのロードマップで示されている重点的なメニューですけれども、特にこういう太陽光発電を屋根に置くとかですね、自家消費用に置くといったようなこと、それから建物の省エネ化、ゼロエミッション化といったようなところや、ゼロカーボンドライブ、このようなメニューが示されています。こちらが地球温暖化対策計画、国の計画ですが、見ていただくと、この家庭部門で 66% の削減が求められている。非常に大きな削減割合を家庭に期待しているというところも特徴です。こちらはちょっと飛ばしますね。これエネルギー基本計画ですが、2030年のエネルギーミックスの姿としまして、再エネを 36% から 38% にしていくんだと。これまでは 18% 程度、これ2019年の時点でですね、18% でしたが、それを倍増させていくというのが日本のエネルギー基本計画の示しているビジョンです。特に太陽光発電が大きな割合を占めています。これは日本の自治体の中で実質二酸化炭素排出ゼロ、カーボンニュートラルを宣言している自治体ですね。毎月増えていってまして、9月末時点で785自治体に上っています。ちょっとこの数字よりもさらに増えています。こちらは東京都のゼロエミッション東京戦略ですけれども、東京都は国よりも、そして他の自治体よりも、より積極的野心的な目標値を掲げています。2030年カーボンハーフですね。再エネの電気利用割合も 50% まで引き上げるということで、こちらの HTT って皆さんご覧になったことありますか？知ってる人、聞いたことある人。パラパラ手が上がってますね。最近電車の広告なんかにもでも見るようになりましたけれども、減らして作って貯める HTT、 それですね。こちらを今スローガンとして、東京都も進めています。そして東京都も環境基本計画を見直し、そして合わせてこれ都民の健康を確保する条例、環境確保条例なんていうふうに言ってますが、それを改正するなどして、さらに積極的に脱炭素に向けた具体的な法的、計画的な基盤を整備しようとしています。特に特徴といいますか、非常に注目されているところとしては、一定量以上の住宅を供給するメーカーに対して、その供給量の一定割合のその住宅に太陽光パネル、太陽光発電設備をしっかりと載せていくということを義務づける。そういう内容もこの条例に盛り込んだというところが注目されているところだと思います。で、これは都内の自治体の状況なんですけれども、やはり都市部と非都市部では、排出量を見ていただいても全然その違いがあると、状況が違うということがわかります。なので、都市部と非都市部でいかに連携していくかというところも、東京全体のゼロエミッションを実現する上では重要だろうということが言えるかと思います。で、最後にゼロカーボンアクション30というのは、これは日本の環境省が示しているのですが、一人一人の生活に引き付けて、簡単に言えば、ありとあらゆる場面で環境負荷を低減するということを、ちょっとずつ気をつけてやっていくと、それがひいては 脱炭素にもつながっていくんだよということなんですね。これ環境省のホームページでも紹介していますので、ぜひまた後で、各自ご覧いただければと思います。最後のスライドですが、まずは自分がどれだけ出してるんだろう CO2 をということを知った上で、減らせるところから減らして、減らしきれない部分は他でしっかりと減らす努力や取り組みをしている人や組織や企業ですね。そういったところをこう支援するようなことをしていくと、オフセットとは言っていますが、必ずしもオフセットではなくても他者を支援するということでもいいかと思います。そうすることで全体としてのカーボンニュートラルに近づいていけるということになると思っています。以上です。私からの話はそれでは以上とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
奥教授ありがとうございました。たった 0.5 度の上昇が我々の世界に対してどのようなエフェクトを与えるのか、具体的な例とともに示してくださって、そしてそれだけではなく、日本の国として、そして地方自治体がどういった取り組みに関して、アグレッシブに、形にしているかということをたくさん伺えることができて非常に貴重な時間でした。ありがとうございます。では続きまして、新居浜丸駐日ノルウェー大使より自国の概要と環境施策などについてご紹介いただきます。それでは新居浜丸大使、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。拍手でお迎えくださいませ。
Excellency, dear students and faculty, thank you first of all for inviting me to talk about such an important and interesting subject. You have invited the ambassadors from two countries that are both quite different from Japan to talk about the task that we all have in common, that is, to reach global zero within the next few years. I hope that we can deliver on your aim to bring out different ideas on how we can all work to promote this urgent task. I will do my best. First, a few words about Norway. Norway is a small country in population with only 5.5 million people, which is not much compared to Japan. However, Norway is about the same size as Japan in square kilometers and has a coastline as long as Japan's, in spite of not being an archipelago. Norway is also, like Japan, filled with mountains and stretches as far as Japan in the north-south direction. In Norway's case, from 57 degrees north to 78 degrees north, which means, of course, that the climate varies a lot in different parts of the country, although overall it's colder than Japan's. Coastal areas in Norway have relatively mild and wet winters, with snow in the mountains, and cool and wet summers, while the inland regions have cold winters with plenty of snow, at least we used to, but in recent years the snow cover has been much less reliable, especially in the lower lying areas. And we have in the inner parts of the country relatively dry summers, especially in the eastern parts of the country. Norwegian families enjoy the changing seasons, as you can see in these slides. Norway and Japan enjoy excellent bilateral relations, where trade and business ties have always been at the core. In fact, these ties go even further back than 1905, when Norway became completely independent from Sweden and established formal diplomatic relations with Japan. Because already before that, at the end of the 19th century, Norwegian ships brought Chinese coal to Japan. Indeed, we are an ocean nation like Japan, and our national revenue is largely dependent on the ocean's resources. Our most important exports are natural gas, oil, fish, metals, and industrial machinery equipment. Norway and Japan share several economic priority areas, such as energy, maritime transport, marine resources, innovation and research. And today, we share the common ambition to transform our economies and adapt our societies to a low-emission future in accordance with the Paris Agreement. We also face some similar demographic challenges as our populations grow older and human resources become scarcer. On the 26th of September, on the occasion of the state funeral of former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, our Foreign Minister, Ms. Anniken Huitfeldt, met with Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, Ms. Hayashi Yoshimasa. State Secretary Ulrichsen from the Ministry of Trade and Industry and Fisheries also visited Japan in early September, and these are just two recent examples of the contacts being taken up again after a long pause caused by the pandemic. Science and technology relations between Norway and Japan are important, and a bilateral agreement between our two countries on cooperation in science and technology was signed in 2003. Our research cooperation includes topics like renewable energy, such as offshore wind and floating solar power, ocean space research for sustainability, ammonia and hydrogen research, cooperation on polar and space research, material science, and climate change and sustainability. Health technologies are our new priority area. Implementing the Paris Agreement is an essential basis for achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 13 on climate action. Under the Paris Agreement, Norway, like almost all other countries in the world, has undertaken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions sharply. The Norwegian government has set its goal to cut 55% of Norwegian greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels by 2030, which is a very ambitious goal indeed. In 2017, the Norwegian Climate Change Act was adopted. There are three key elements in the transfer to a greener society and economy. 1, we must reduce emissions. 2, we must increase sharply the production of renewables. And 3, we must develop technologies for new industries. When it comes to reducing emissions and Norway, it's important to take into account that Norway has always produced almost 100% of its electricity from hydroelectric power, from our waterfalls and rivers, including for much of our heavy industry, such as metal production. This means that we must reduce our CO2 emissions in other sectors than in power plants, such as road transport, marine transport, and industrial production, including the production of oil and natural gas, where Norway is a large exporter most of all. Norway is, however, in a good position to deliver. In the oil and gas sector, we have in fact had strict restrictions in place to reduce emissions for decades. In the future, the remaining consumption of fossil fuels in the world will have to be offset by carbon capture and storage, which is today subject to intense research and trials. Because in a transition phase, natural gas will have to remain important for the European transition to renewable energy, among other things, as a stabilizing energy resource. We have high ambitions when it comes to produce more renewable energy, contributing to the global energy transition, including the remaining fossil fuel use in our country. The aim of the Norwegian government's energy policy is to contribute to a secure green transition. An important issue, therefore, is to put to good use our national advantages and the competence that we have developed over several decades of oil and gas exploration in a new way, to develop new business areas such as offshore wind, blue and green hydrogen and ammonia, as well as CCS, carbon capture and storage. Offshore wind is currently our largest renewable export. Ship owners, shipyards, and suppliers are increasingly turning their attention to this growing market. Another energy industry ready for takeoff is hydrogen. Hydrogen as an energy carrier will be important for the energy transition, provided that it can be done both at scale and with low or no emissions. Japan's basic hydrogen strategy and Norway's national hydrogen strategy will hopefully pave the way for new developments in both countries. because for some industries, carbon capture and storage is one of few available technologies to reduce emissions. CCS can contribute to a just transition by maintaining employment in carbon-intensive industries and create new jobs associated with CCS itself. Let me also briefly mention some global initiatives. In 2008, we initiated Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. The rainforests are vital. By absorbing large amounts of CO2, they help to slow down global warming. Tropical forests also have other important functions. They are a source of water and food for both humans and animals, and they are very important biodiversity ecosystems. But the world's tropical rainforests continue to disappear at a rapid pace. Norway has pledged up to 3 billion Norwegian kroner each year to help save the world's tropical forests while improving the livelihoods of those who live off, in, and near these forests. Norway is also an international leader in ocean management. The Ocean Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy was launched in 2018. Since then, 17 world leaders have joined the panel. Japan's Prime Minister has also been a member since its beginning. The Ocean Panel member countries are working to promote sustainable management of their own ocean areas, as well as the world at large. The panel recognizes the key role of the oceans in climate-related efforts aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. A key message is also that the oceans must be protected against pollution and unsustainable exploitation if they are to continue to sustain our economies, our coastal communities, and our livelihoods in the future. And this is what is meant by a sustainable ocean economy. And you see here a beautiful ship. This is the 108-year-old Norwegian tall ship Statsråd Lehmkuhl, which visited Japan as part of the One Ocean expedition now in September. The ship is circumnavigating the globe to create attention and share knowledge about the crucial role of the ocean for sustainable development in a global perspective. Turning from the global to the local, let me underline that climate policy and action is not something that can only be handled by government officials in ministries. Local engagement and implementation are crucial. Oslo received from the European Commission the award of being the European Green Capital in 2019. And this title is received upon application among competing cities for their progress during the last 5 to 10 years, their current status and their future plans. And Oslo competed with a number of other cities to achieve this award. Oslo, in fact, has one of the world's most ambitious climate strategies in line with the Paris Agreement. It has its own climate budget. It's a world leader on electric mobility. And it's the first city to test the carbon capture and storage from waste incineration, just to mention a few of the points that were taken into account. On that note, the mayor of Oslo will in fact visit Japan next week. One of the topics she will discuss with her Japanese counterparts is what cities themselves can do to become more climate friendly. Oslo, Tokyo, and Yokohama are all part of the C40 Cities Network, a network of mayors of nearly 100 world-leading cities that collaborate to deliver the urgent action needed right now to confront the climate crisis. So this talk has, of course, been mostly on climate policy. However, I want to end by reminding you that we are today, in fact, facing two crises that must be solved at the same time: an energy and climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis. A very large number of the world's animal and plant species are threatened by extinction all over the world. All indications are also that the pressure on environmental values and resources will be even stronger in the future in Norway and Japan and globally. These two crises are, of course, also linked. In addition to the strong pressure on all natural habitats, rapid climate change is in itself a great threat to biodiversity. Growth is still necessary for human societies to continue to evolve, and green growth is possible. But it requires policies that enable new technologies to replace yesterday's fossil solutions. Efforts to halt climate change involve great challenges, but also offer opportunities for all of us, both as individuals and as societies at large. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. 新浜の大使ありがとうございました。ノルウェーがどういうふうに積極的に環境保全と向き合っているのか、そして大使の一番最後の言葉ですよね。チャレンジはたくさんあっても、それでもチャンスもたくさんあるということで、我々のこの環境保全、カーボンニュートラルとどういうふうに向き合うべきなのか、いろんなヒントをいただきました。大使ありがとうございます。それでは続きましては、アルファヒーム駐日アラブ首長国連邦大使より、自国の概要と環境施策などについてご紹介いただきます。アルファヒーム大使、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
First thing to take the mask.
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
お願いいたします。
今日は聞いてくるありがとうございました。週末を短くしてごめんなさい。退屈しないように頑張ります。私の名前はアルファヒム・シハブと申します。アラブ首長国連邦の大使です。今から英語で話します。So again, thank you very much for making your time and coming on a Sunday or a Saturday. This year marks a very important year for UAE-Japan relations. We celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations between our countries. We've also go back even furthermore. If we look at the first oil shipment from UAE to Japan, it was 60 years ago. And we have 20 years of direct flights. And going back, our people remember Japan for one thing. Japan was the country that actually flipped our economy because we were a very humble, small fishing village with an economy based on pearl diving. And Mikimoto managed to change our industry and economy overnight. So UAE is located in the Middle East. The size is almost exactly the same size as Hokkaido. The temperature is the opposite. We're very hot compared to Hokkaido, of course. Our economy, we've been trying to diversify and we've managed to reach 28% oil and 72% non-oil. So whatever you see, we have managed to diversify and we're looking forward to diversify even more. Another interesting aspect is the fact that we participated in Expo 1970 in Osaka. And last year we also hosted Expo in Dubai. And next we will come back again to Osaka. So we feel this strong connection with regards to the Expo. And we're very happy that we'll be coming back. And one fact about Japan in our region, people in the Arab world call Japan Planet Japan because they always see Japan as being way more advanced than any other country around the world. And we have very high respect for Japan and the Japanese people. Energy transition in the UAE has always been linked with nature. We didn't have a long history of industrialization because we're a 50-year-old country. We just celebrated our 50 years last year. So for us, we did not come from an industrialized CO2 emissions, but we understand that action has to be taken. And our timeline, since '89, we've joined the Vienna Convention on ozone protection. 95, we joined the UNFCCC. 2005, we ratified the Kyoto Protocol. And 2009, we started hosting the permanent location of IRENA. 2011, we started building our first nuclear power plants, which is also a first in the Middle East and North African region. 2015, we were the first Arab and Middle Eastern country to ratify the Paris Agreement. 2017, we came up with our own energy policy. And to just look at this energy strategy 2050, we want to have 44% of our energy coming from clean energy, 38% from gas, 12% from clean coal, and 6% from nuclear. We also want to have a reduction of greenhouse gases by 31% by 2030. The previous target was 23.5. Of course, when the professor showed the map, I wanted to point out that UAE was missing, but she explained this because we just announced this last October that UAE, again, the first country in the region to actually announce and commit to net zero 2050. The reason we're doing this, even though we're an oil producing country, is we know that there is this transition. We have to move away, but at the same time, we have to keep what we have. And our leaders mentioned that we want to celebrate when we actually export the last barrel of oil. We don't want to be caught in a surprise, but we want to be ready and able and already diversified. So our clean energy mix, we want to go down to 50% and save 700 billion dirhams by the year 2050, increase our efficiency by 40%, with investments of 600 billion dirhams by 2050, reduction of CO2 in power generation by 70%. And one fact is that in UAE, oil or gasoline prices have been deregulated since the year 2015. So whatever you pay at the gas station, we pay. We don't subsidize the fuel. So in July, in the UAE, we used to pay 180 yen per liter. So similar to Japan. So there is no advantage. And for us, this is so that people are more efficient and thinking of alternatives. And we've seen a huge shift in terms of adoption of hybrid cars, in terms of EVs also. Nuclear energy would also provide 25% of the UAE electricity, with coal also playing a big role. With regards to Japan, UAE has always been a safe and secure energy supplier to Japan. Japan has had, since 1967 till today, till the next 20 or 30 years, oil concessions in the UAE. In the whole Middle East, we were the only place where Japan had oil concessions. I think now just one other country is offering Japan oil concessions. So Japanese companies have been working in the UAE since December 1967 till today. We have the least carbon-intensive barrels of oil. I know I'm trying maybe to sell you oil, but mukashi no shigoto wa kinyu hanbai desu. We're the first to bring carbon capture and storage to the region. So, and this is in collaboration with Japanese companies. So we had, in 2013, 800,000 tons of carbon dioxide captured. The plan is to go to 5 million tons by 2030. And as the ambassador mentioned, it's very important to look at how we can reduce this impact. At the same time, we're investing in our oil industry to increase the capacity of our oil production. The main thing to know and to point is that this is a transition period. We are looking at different solutions while we are doing this. The UAE started this in 2006, so almost 16 years ago, we started working on alternative energy, on sustainable energy, and we've invested $50 billion in 70 countries. with an additional 50 billion by the year 2030. We have 3 of the world's largest solar power plants and the cheapest per kilowatt solar power. Nuclear, we almost, when it's all full online, we'll have 5,600 megawatt. I know that just now I can compare this with Japan because Japan has closed its nuclear power plant, but we can say that we're almost equal to Japan. So something to talk about. Waste to energy also with Japanese companies. And the most important thing that we will have next year is we will be hosting COP28. This is for us a very important point in time because this will be the first global stocktake after Paris Agreement in 2015. We will come back to see what worked, what didn't work, how ambitious were we in setting targets, what were the results. So we're coming back and UAE wants to make sure that we do address climate change. Paris was a milestone and countries agreed to set emission reduction targets, but we're coming back to see where we are and how we can do this. We've already also supported countries by putting forward $1.5 billion in aid to 40 countries. And we're always looking forward to continue and work with other countries because we feel that this is something that we have to take immediately. When looking at initiatives, the UAE is consisted of 7 emirates. So we have federal level and we have a local emirate level initiatives and projects. So what we've done is we've changed our building codes so that it's more sustainable, reduction of greenhouse gases, looking at ways to reduce consumption. And when we had Expo, it was a sustainability showcase. We've been able to use hydrogen, we've been able to look at different solutions. The slogan of Expo was connecting minds, creating the future. It was mainly 3 pavilions: opportunity, mobility, and sustainability. So for us, sustainability is very important. We live in a very harsh climate. We don't have natural sources of water. We rely heavily on desalination because we don't have rivers, we don't have any other source to use hydropower, for example. So we live with what we have. This is why we focused on nuclear, we focused on solar, and we're focusing on how to make our own energy mix cleaner. The most important thing that we see and we face is always changing behavior, because people will always want to stick with what they have and will not want to change or adapt a new thing. For example, EVs were very difficult to convince someone in the UAE to take an EV until the price of gasoline went up. We saw a 200% increase in sales. So this was a trigger. And always we were a bit anxious about moving towards having a higher range in this, but we've seen this change. Hydrogen and ammonia are also 2 important areas we're working closely with Japan. We've signed a memorandum of cooperation on hydrogen last year, and we are also sent several shipments of ammonia and hydrogen to Japan, and working towards how we can utilize this. We recently signed something called the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Initiative between UAE and Japan. And sustainability or sustainable development is a pillar of this. So we want to work on environmental protection, promotion of sustainable economic growth, decarbonization, and realistic energy transition towards carbon-free society. We're also putting another pillar, which is collaborate to achieve the SDGs by 2030 and support IRENA. We're happy to say that we're Japan's 10th largest trading partner, seventh in imports. Again, sorry, because the oil prices went up. But we're always looking to see how we can work closer with Japan. In January 2021, in the UAE, we've created something called the Abu Dhabi Hydrogen Alliance. This is in order for us to seek new ways to market, to sell, and to actually produce this hydrogen for the future. So everything we do at the moment, even though we're an oil-producing country, is we want to go and work faster because we know that we cannot wait till everything is over. We have to be proactive. And this is what we've been doing. And even when we started our nuclear power plants, some people were skeptical since we had oil. But to come and burn oil compared with getting a cleaner energy source is something that we always look at our leadership guidance for this. So again, we want to be there, we want to support, and we want to make a big difference. So thank you very much for your attention.
アルファヒム大使ありがとうございました。Thank you very much, Ambassador. さあ、ここまでノルウェー、アラブ首長国連邦、日本3カ国の環境政策を中心にお話しいただきました。ここからはですね、先ほどご登壇いただいた皆様とパネルディスカッションを行っていきたいと思います。Ambassadors、そして、Professor Oku、皆様どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。お願いいたします。Thank you。さあ、最初のテーマは脱炭素社会の実現に向けてです。なお、ここからの進行に関しては英語でのご案内にて失礼いたします。So, let us begin. Before we start this discussion, I would like to thank both ambassadors, Ambassador Nihama, Ambassador Al-Fahim, and Professor Oku on their presentations. And thank you so much. And I would like to remind everyone that this is a discussion not just a one way, but a discussion all together. So there will be a Q&A at the very end. So please have your questions ready, and yeah, let's do this together. I would like to start this session about how we shall achieve a carbon neutral society. Ambassadors, now I both understood from your respective presentations on how your government and how your country and how your people are coordinating themselves against this global matter. But in order to achieve global carbon neutrality, we need everybody's cooperation. I think both of you agree on this. How do you think we should proceed with this? First of all, can I ask Ambassador Al-Fahim?
Thank you very much. I mean, to begin with, we all need to think that whatever we do does make a difference. And action starts with us. So it's the choice that we make, whether it is a car, whether it's a house building, whether it is the choice of energy. But we need to make sure that we take action. If we just wait till everyone changes, then it will be too late. This is why I'm keeping the same option that we have at the moment. So for us, we produce oil, but we've pursued going into renewables for the past 17 years or so. So we know that we have to take action while keeping our options open.
Excellent. Ambassador Al-Fahim, I liked your description of Japan being a planet. This is not just from the people of the UAE, but this is something in the Arab world. You guys actually refer to Japan as being a planet?
The Arab world calls Japan Kawkab al-Yaban.
I see.
Meaning planet Japan, because everything in Japan, to them there, is advanced and everything is way more organized, and especially the discipline in Japan. It's something that we really respect. And seeing this, that Japan does things in this way is one reason why we really appreciate and respect Japan in the Arab world.
Yes, indeed, Ambassador. I think you had some personal experience with that, with your time in Japan. If I'm correct, was it in Kyushu that you had?
Shishin wa beppu desu. I used to live in Kyushu for 6 months and then Tokyo 6 months. So this was 2003 to 2004.
Excellent. And you felt the discipline in the air.
You still feel it everywhere. And this is why in Japan you have always tsukaikata. Everything has a way to do. So for us, we always invent new ways. But in Japan, there is always a way to do something. If you want to learn something, you can always have a place where you learn, which is very easy to guide and make all people competent.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Nihama, let me put the question back to carbon neutrality. I was asking how we could achieve this target, not as an individual country, but as a collective, as a planet, as mankind, actually. What's your take on this situation then? And what are your thoughts about it? Thank you.
The most important point is actually that we have to do all of the above, because this task is so urgent and so huge that we don't really have a choice in the matter. We cannot choose one strategy over the other. We have to employ all of them simultaneously. We have to act as individuals, thinking of our own personal carbon footprint. We have to work in our societies, in our local communities, as nations, and globally. And that is also what my country is trying to do. All municipalities in Norway work very hard to reduce waste, for example. And I mentioned Oslo as an example because it's the largest city in Norway, although small in Japanese terms. There is no longer any landfills in Oslo. All waste is either recycled or incinerated, and the energy created by the incineration is used to heat buildings in Oslo. And then the same plant is now also being used as a test case for carbon capture and storage for the future, because uses such as this and also nearby cement production plants, those are actually examples of things that will produce CO2 also in the future that we need to take care of. And Norway is an oil and gas producing country, but most of all an oil and gas exporting country. We don't use very much of it ourselves. And the industry itself works very hard to reduce its CO2 emissions during production. But of course, this whole industry is also in a transition phase, because we're moving into a society in the world at large where we will use less and less fossil fuels. And that is why the reuse of this competence and experience developed over 50 years is also very much at the forefront. For example, all of Norway's oil and gas is produced out in the North Sea, which is a very rough piece of ocean. And a lot of the competence that has been acquired during these years can be recycled, so to speak, into developing, for example, offshore wind energy. And that development is already in full swing. And we have to reduce our own emissions. As I mentioned, since we don't use fossil fuels for power production, we have to look at other sectors. I mentioned industry already, but there's also transport. There is personal transport, cars. 7 out of 10 cars sold in Norway today are EVs, completely electric. And the percentage in the overall car park is rising very rapidly. And we're now also looking into electrifying the heavier vehicles. And not least, coastal transport. If you remember the map, Norway has a very, very indented coastline with lots of islands. So like Japan's, we have lots and lots and lots of ferries. And they are now being electrified at a quite rapid pace. So these are only 2 examples. And of course, making our homes less energy demanding, insulation, retrofitting windows, placing solar panels on our roofs. All of this must be done. And then we have to work internationally. Putting a price on the CO2 emissions is very important. So we are a part of the European system in that respect, making it more and more costly to emit CO2, which helps bring out reductions where they are least costly, in fact. And of course, also assisting developing countries in making this transition, which in very many cases have very small CO2 emissions per capita and are suffering the consequences of global climate change without any fault of their own. So it's obvious that it is responsibility upon countries like ours to assist them in this change.
Very impressive. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would like to ask Professor Oku about how she has felt through the presentations of the respective ambassadors and how global cooperation is so important for the well-beings of our future. Can I have your thoughts then, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, I truly think that global cooperation is, of course, necessary. And from presentations of these two countries' ambassador, we realized that differences between the countries, of course, the resources that we can rely on is different. Energy sources, it's different. Japan has very scarce resource. And of course, we try to promote renewable energy, but it's mainly solar power. But we see many disputes arising locally in Japan. I don't know if the ambassadors aware, know the cases, but try to introduce large solar facilities in Japan always raises disputes and objections from local communities. And so it's very important to go through the due process in implementing renewable energy facilities in Japan. But well, we all face different situations, but the things that we need to do, well, we can find a common things that we all can share. And that is that Ambassador from UAE had mentioned we are all at the time of transition. We are exploring what is the best options that we can use to realize carbon neutral by 2050. We know the exact answer. We don't know the exact answer or decisive options, but we have to do whatever we can to realize the carbon neutral. And also, we all share the same goal.
Yes.
By 2050, the carbon neutrality must be realized. Otherwise, our Earth, the world, cannot survive. So we all share the same goal and share the same vision, and that's very important in order to make us go forward to collaborate internationally. And that's my opinion.
Yes.
And I would like to, can I ask questions to these two
this is
ambassadors?
Yes.
It's a very important opportunity, great opportunity. You mentioned that the roles of local authorities are essential. I agree. And there are local authorities in Japan as well that they are trying to take initiative in realizing carbon neutrality and reduce CO2 emissions dramatically. How about in UAE? What kind of roles that local authorities are playing and collaborating with the national government?
So we have an energy strategy for 2050 where the overall reduction of greenhouse gases the energy, distribution. Where are we getting energy? 44%, let's say, from clean, and then 34% from gas. So this is the overall, and net zero 2050. However, each and every emirate, 7 of them, have different projects. So we're focusing on solar, let's say in Abu Dhabi. Dubai is focusing on waste to energy projects, and also focusing on clean coal. Other emirates also focusing on this and focusing on sustainable projects, in addition to the different building codes, in addition to the support for usage of electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles in fleets. So we've seen 108% increase in hybrid sales. And almost the only company that sells hybrids is Toyota. But when it comes to electric vehicles, Tesla has the market, 54%. The second is Porsche, because they sell electric cars, and then Chinese manufacturers. But when it comes to us, each and every emirate, so it's not the municipality, it's the emirate itself, like the prefecture, that sets what it wants. And we're working towards this, but the end goal is to reach net zero by 2050. And all of us are coming together for COP28 next year. This is why we're also hosting it in the same location where we hosted Expo 2020. So the same place, the same sustainability pavilions will be there for people to come and experience, and to actually push everyone to come together. Because alone we cannot work. We have to work with every and each country around the world.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And Ambassador Nihima, what are your thoughts on the question then? Thank you. Yes, the question that Professor was just asking about the infrastructure. That's right. You wanted to ask Professor, Ambassador Nihima too?
To Ambassador Niham, to you,
Yep.
I would like to ask about the cooperation between cities, because you have already mentioned that the roles of local authorities is very important, essential. But how about the collaboration among cities in Norway?
Cities in Norway, of course, collaborate with each other. For example, on recycling, where different cities are specialized in different things. And also, of course, there's, like in Japan, there's a great difference in the size of different municipalities, from the very smallest ones, which with only a few hundred inhabitants, to the city of Oslo. But I think that the main the general framework is set by national policies, but each municipality also has great liberty in developing these guidelines appropriate to their own settings. Many local communities, for example, work with making public transports climate neutral by introducing different forms of electric vehicles for buses, or using biofuels also in some cases. So that is just one example. I think they also quite a lot learn from each other and from the example set by other cities.
Thank you, Ambassador. I have a personal question I would like to ask both of you about. I totally understand that both your countries, it doesn't matter what age you are, people from the UAE and people from Norway, they're very conscious of the situation and the urgency I feel from both of your words. Now, when did this urgency actually start? And could you both feel it when both of you were back in your respective countries? Because the level of knowledge, the passion there, and the urgency is so evident, you know, and this could be something that in Japan lacks in certain elements. But let's start with you, Ambassador Nihama. What are your thoughts? Did you feel it when you grew up back in Norway?
Well, in fact, I did, and it's just by coincidence, but my father is a physicist. He's a very
Right.
old man now, almost 90 years old, but
I
he has
see.
worked for many decades on solar and wind energy. And people like him, of course, knew many decades ago about the problem of the atmosphere becoming more and more filled with CO2. So I've known about this phenomenon and this problem since I was a child. But I wouldn't say that this was something that very many Norwegians cared about in the 1960s and 70s.
Yes.
So that has become more recently, but I think the point was brought back to many Norwegians by the fact that, what I mentioned, that the snow cover in lower lying parts of southern Norway has become much more unreliable. And you would maybe think that this is a great advantage, but to Norwegians it definitely is not. The snow is the bright part of our winters, it brightens up literally by reflecting the daylight that we have, and it's not much daylight
Yes.
on these latitudes. And it also makes it possible to enjoy winters. So when it's all dark and rainy and moist, it really is something that you feel as a threat, and that you have to go a long, long ways to be able to go skiing, for example. And this is,
I
of course,
see.
a luxury problem in terms of climate change, but it brings back home to people that it's real. And the fact of the matter is that global warming happens much faster in the global north and the very south of the Earth. So what we see right now is that the glaciers, both in mainland Norway and up in Svalbard, are melting very rapidly. And you can see the same thing on the South Pole. This is, of course, hugely worrying, not so much because of the abilities of Norwegians to go skiing, but because it means also that the oceans will rise. Because it's the sea ice of the North Pole doesn't really matter because it's floating in water anyway. But that mainland glaciers are melting, that has a direct impact on the ocean level. And this is, of course, a huge problem for the whole globe.
Indeed. Thank you. Ambassador Fahim, can I ask you how you have felt this, maybe from your childhood, maybe, or it might be something that grew upon you when you continued with your life as a student?
Well, when we look at the UAE, we only became a country 50 years ago.
Right.
So prior to that, we used to live in a country where we didn't have roads. We relied heavily on camels, on tents, on such. So we were very environmentally friendly. We didn't use CFCs or air conditioning or refrigerators.
No carbon emission with camels, right?
So we're used to it. And it's still part of our culture. It's still something that we do when we have a vacation, we go to the desert. So for us, we came, let's say, late to the game. We started industrializing, building roads, building factories in the 70s. And with this, we started increasing our own emissions until in the middle 2000s. So by 2005-6, then our leadership saw that we had some of the highest per capita emissions in the world. But it's all only because we came very late in this industrializing game that everyone started 150 years ago. So we were trying to build our country and we managed to take big leaps. So we're very proud of our achievements in the past 50 years and where we've reached in terms of human development, in terms of facilities that we have in our country. So we took this decision in 2006 that no, we need to also focus on this, not only on oil and energy, but we need to diversify. We need to look for solutions for us and other countries. So this is when we started. We created a new company called Masdar, which started investing around the world in different different portfolios of energy. So I think they have 24 gigawatts of energy portfolio around the world. So we try to support while we're also trying to learn ourselves. So, and now we're seeing this with the higher prices, how people are shifting their usage, how people are becoming more aware. And we went on a planting spree of mangroves.
Right.
Mangroves actually capture 10 times the amount of CO2 when you compare them to tropical forests. So we've been planting them everywhere, and they live in our harsh climate. We want something that can live with us. And they live in salty water. So again, we saw this and we started planting them all around Abu Dhabi city. So if you come and visit, you'll be impressed by how they look. And they create also habitat. They protect from the shores of the UAE. So we're trying to do this as much as we can while keeping the environment.
Yeah, definitely. If I have the opportunity to go to Abu Dhabi, I want to check out those mangroves. They must be awesome and very impressive. I would like to go to our next discussion. We've talked about how countries are changing, how people are facing up to reality. We've talked a bit about how corporate entities are changing society too. But what about individuals? Now, Ambassador Nihama, you were talking about carbon footprint, and this is an urgency that needs to be felt individually, person to person, right? Do you feel there's an individual conscience of the situation in your respective countries? And how do you think we should change the individual mind? I mean, I feel there is change, obviously, and I'm sure both of you do, and I'm sure Professor Okuda, through her lectures and through her students too. But how should we structure the individual change of mind to change the future with the urgency that is felt? Ambassador Nihama, can I ask you first then?
Well, this is, of course, an individual question, and each and every one of us has the best answers, I guess. Personally, I feel that my worst conscience is actually that I use planes quite a lot, because my home country is very far from Japan. On the contrary, when I'm in Japan, I always use the train. You have a fabulous train network in Japan. It really is fantastic. I have traveled to Kagoshima on a train. I've traveled to Sapporo on the train, and everywhere in between. And not only the Shinkansen, also the local trains are really fantastic. So almost all travel in Japan can be done by train, sustainable public transport. Even if, of course, not all power production in Japan is sustainable yet. Yet. Otherwise, I think that all of us can do a lot by being more conscious consumers. That is for sure. And that is probably the greatest problem in countries such as Norway and Japan, that we have too many things and we don't dispose of them always in a good way. So less use and more recycling. That is, of course, also a contribution that everybody can make. And the list goes on and on. And my advice to all parents is, of course, to ask your children, if you don't have any good ideas yourself. At least in Norway, children are extremely climate and environmentally conscious.
Indeed.
They learn about it in school and in all kinds of clubs. And I've got many tips from my children myself.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Ambassador Al-Fahim?
Again, I mean, to change behavior, this is the most difficult challenge that we will face. And many countries take different actions. So some of them will tax modes of transport that are hurting the environment. Some of them will add different levies and such. And we've seen this in the UAE when we removed the price support for our gasoline in the UAE. And whenever there was an impact, you see people shift towards better and more efficient. And again, what we try to do as a government is we try to set standards, and we start to take action even before people, because sometimes people will think that it's only me. It will not make a big difference. But we want each and everyone to feel this. We're teaching this to our kids in schools. We're teaching this to our people that work with us. We're teaching it to everyone that every single action actually makes a big difference. And this is why we're always trying to promote what we do, which is also why we went and bid and won the hosting of the International Renewable Energy Agency in the UAE, because we want to show that, yes, we are serious about making this difference. And again, we're building this, and we want to make sure that we make a difference. So people will sometimes change behavior based on incentive, but it's always important to show them that, yes, whatever you make will make a big difference, whether it's changing the way you eat or whether you're changing the way you take a vacation. And for us, when we come here to Japan, we see it's a very sustainable country, but I'm always annoyed with the amount of packaging that you have. Extreme packaging.
So Ambassador Nihama nods furiously too. Yes, Professor Oku, you're dying to speak.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, I'm dying to speak. I was looking at this public poll on climate change carried out by the Cabinet Office in Japan in the year 2020. And around 90% of the people answered that they are aware of the issue of climate change, global warming, and they are willing to take some actions. But 7% of the people are not willing to do anything. And the reason, there are two main reasons. One is that, like you said, even if I act and do something, that wouldn't change the situation. It's just a small step, very little impact. Nothing will change. So I don't. Then why bother? That's one reason. And the second reason is that people don't know what to do. What kind of action can contribute in reducing CO2? So for those people, if we can give enough and correct and concrete information, then we can push them to take some actions. So in that sense, I think the education is very important, especially from very younger age. Of course, I give lectures on climate change at the university, but it's a bit too late. So for the education for the younger people is very important.
Yes, I remember going to school back in England, and we would have discussions about greenhouse gases and the effect that carbon has on society at the age of 11. And we were actually forced to write essays, 1,500 words long at the age of 11, and then discuss about it, But it was kind of, interestingly, rather entertaining to hear what each of us really thought about, because this class was full of Chinese guys, from guys from Dubai, guys from Russia, and it was very, very ferocious about what each one thought. And I just think that this element of having a discussion, very important for Japanese youths to have from the age of shōgakusei level, right? Because Professor Oku, wouldn't you agree that discussing something in the manner that Europeans, or in the manner that everyone has in the world, is something that comes not too natural to the Japanese youth's mind? You know, this kind of shifts away from the environment. But if I could have a prompt answer from you, Professor Oku, what do you think?
The attitude of Japanese
Just
students?
like being able to discuss something in detail from the age of 7 or 8. And I think this is important for Japanese society to improve to our next step, even with the environment. Well, am I being too...
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes. But
Excellent.
yes, many students in Japan are very shy. And I ask in my classes.
Yes.
I ask students to submit the comment papers afterwards, and then they are thinking very seriously, and they have their own opinions. I can see that from their papers, but they're not so enthusiastic and just letting that
When
their
it comes to
feeling
action?
out, actually speak out.
Okay.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
I think one reason is that we always think it's in the future. In the future. It's not today, tomorrow, but even though if it's in the future, if you walk one step today, you come after a year, you've walked several kilometers. But if you don't walk, then you're still at your place. So each little step that we do will make a difference. I think it's on us to teach the next generation and the current generation that each step, each move, everything we do makes a difference. But without this, I think it will be very difficult to make an impact, because sometimes you ask, people always associate with cost. Change the way you do things, change the way you eat, change the way you transport. So if it affects us, we're a bit reluctant to make a difference. But if you say, no, you need just to make those, and this is so let's do a calculator. If you do this, you will save this in a year or in 10 years. Then you will see a big impact. If you look at cars now, when they stop at signals, you have the idle stop. So, and this is something I've seen last weekend. I was in Nara, and then maybe 15 cars came, and then they stopped, and then quiet. So 15 cars times 30 seconds, it makes a big difference. But I was always asked by friends, why is this stupid system work? What does it do? It will not make a difference. But then you need to explain to them, no, you'll have 100 cars at the signal that save 30 seconds times 100 every 3 minutes, and so on. So individually, it will not make a difference, but just put it under a magnifying glass, make it bigger, and show them the impact.
Yes, as a collective, of course, each step counts. Oh, would you like to add something? Please.
Yes, I think that in all societies it's important to build on the strength of that society. And in Japan, I think maybe the strongest force of all is peer pressure, which is a strong force in Norway as well. And it has meant a lot, for example, to make people recycle properly their own garbage. But I think it's important to remember that this is not a question of reforming each individual's mind. It also is a question that really requires political decisions. Also to create incentives for people. For example, the electric vehicle revolution in Norway has very strongly been driven by incentives made by the government. To begin with, cars are expensive in Norway because they're heavily taxed. And just by reducing the taxes for electrical vehicles, made them more interesting to buy for people. And also gasoline is heavily taxed, has always been, or at least for several decades, as a carbon tax. So when you don't have to pay that expensive gasoline anymore because you can charge your vehicle at home, of course that makes also another incentive for people. So help people do the right thing. And that is a political responsibility, but it is, of course, in all democracies, a responsibility for us all to elect politicians that will make the right decisions. So it comes back to us, but in several ways.
Yes, thank you. Now, I would like to, we're fastly running out of time, I'm afraid. This session today, of course, we want to be talking about carbon neutrality too, but we also want to be talking about how our students here can find themselves working in a global manner. And I would like to ask both ambassadors, because, who better to have the crucial words of than both of you who work on a global scale. How do you have any advice on the students who want to be working in a global fashion, in a global manner, on how to realize their dreams and how to make their next steps in their lives? Shall we go with Ambassador Al-Fahim to start off with?
We were once in the same chairs. So, first of all, enjoy your time here and make the most out of it. I think if you focus on something and you work on it and always try to be persistent, change will come because we've seen change in so many things. So whatever you want to pursue, just keep on going at it. Never give up. And it takes time, it takes hard work, but being here, we understand that you spend the time and effort while working. So there are lots of entities, and there is no limitation, to be honest, on where you can go. With this industry, I think employs 17 million at the moment, the climate change industry, and it's prospected to go up to 40 million, I believe, by 2030 or so. So there is a prospect, but see what you can add and make sure that you add value, because a solution that you can come up with might help all of us. We live, I say this because we come from an area where we lived with no ACs, we lived with no refrigerators, no entertainment, yet someone else built those things. So whatever you can do to actually make other people's lives easier, I think will be the best solution. It's not only a job, it's a career, it's a life that you choose in order to change every person's future. So whatever you can do, please go very deep. Don't stay on the surface. That's my only advice.
Thank you, Ambassador. Precious words indeed. Ambassador Nihama.
I think that all students have a unique opportunity which might not come back to you in life, of having, years at your disposal where you can learn, where you can get to know and understand things, and we can spend a lot of time becoming knowledgeable and wiser. And please use it. I think that is the most important thing a student can do, to learn and to engage, because that's the second part. Don't dream, plan. That is, don't follow your dreams, make plans and act upon them. You can do it in personal life, in the organizations that you engage in, and in the friendships and connections that you make, and in the career path that you choose. There are many different ways that you can act. Personally, a little bit by chance, I ended up writing my master's thesis on the Montreal Protocol on saving the ozone layer. And it made me so interested in international affairs that I ended up applying for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to become a diplomat. So environment brought me into this rather than the other way around. And I also was very, very lucky, because at the end of my student days, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which changed the European reality dramatically for the better. And it made me understand that whatever humans have done, we can also change, which gave me an optimistic outlook. Of course, today's world looks quite a lot darker than it did at that time. but it still holds true that there are actually things you can do. There are always things that you can do. So to keep that faith, I think, also is important, because it's easy to lose it when you look out on all the challenges that are facing you. But look at what you can do and not at what you not can do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ambassador. 皆様ありがとうございました。ここで本日の講演に関して質疑応答の時間を、もし時間が許す限り設けさせていただきたいと思います。会場の皆さんからもし質問などがあれば、ぜひこの機会を最大限に使っていただいて、質問したい方は手を挙げていただいて、私がね、指させていただきますので、指された方はスタッフがマイクを持って、近くまで参りますので、お手数ですが通路まで、出ていただいてマイクを取って、質問を聞いていただければ嬉しいです。それでは、again, here we go for Q&A。質問がある方はぜひ挙手をお願いいたします。いかがでしょうか。ではちょうど真ん中にいらっしゃる方にスタッフの方お願いできますでしょうか。ありがとうございます。すいません。ではちょっと通路の方に来ていただいて、その場でも大丈夫ですかね。はい。ではその場でお願いします。
今日は貴重なお話を聞かせていただきありがとうございました。今私は東京都庁で働いている職員なんですけれども、ちょっとお伺いしたいことがございます。ちょっと海外の取り組みについてお伺いしたいんですけれども、私たち、社会人なんですけれども、日本では環境教育が義務教育にもなっていなくて、私なんかは、小中学校で環境について学校で学んだことはほぼほぼなくてですね、そうやって成長してきた大人が多いんですね。そうやって教育を受けていなかった世代が今こうやって成長してきて、やはり環境問題に関心のない私の友達も非常に多くてですね、こういったフォーラムとかに参加している人たちは環境意識の高い方だと思うんですが、こういったフォーラムとかに積極的に参加しなければディスカッションもできないし、知識も得ていくことができないと思うんですけれども、そういった点において、海外ではどのような形で政府が、社会人に対してもっとエコフレンドリーなビヘイバーを取りましょうという形で促しているのかということについてお伺いしたいです。
Excellent question. Did you guys both get that? Excellent. So who would like to go first then? Can I ask Ambassador Nihama maybe?
I think in Norway an important part of the answer is that NGOs have always been a very important part of Norwegian society. And we have had organizations that have been conscious about protecting nature for a very long time. Of course, the climate issue is more recent, but still, I would say that the urge to take nature preservation and climate into account has come as much from below as from above. It's not something the government has imposed on anyone, it's something that the people and popular organizations have rather demanded of their politicians. But all countries are different. Japanese society is structured different than the Norwegian one. Maybe in Japan, the most important force might be, your neighborhood associations or your professional organizations. I think that the audience here knows better than me what would be the best way to change Japanese society. But I just end up with my general advice, which is look at what you can do rather than what you cannot do.
Thank you. Yes, of course, Ambassador Fahim.
So just to answer this question, we live now in a time where our attention span is seconds because of the distractions that we have. So to learn and to teach, we always try to have some sort of engagement with employees in the government sector. At the same time, we want to make sure that people spend the time to learn. Anything, no matter how challenging, if you put the time to learn and to make it easier to absorb words and phrases, will make it much easier. So if you say 200,000 or 2 million tons of carbon are removed, it will not make that much sense. But when you say it's like taking out 200,000 cars from the road, then you can explain it to other people. So I believe just put it in the way that makes it easier for you. For us, this is a challenge everywhere. If you're not an expert in the field, it will not be as engaging. But again, it's the environment, it's something that we live in, and it's something that we need to take an action. So I hope we answered your question.
Thank you, Ambassador Al-Fahim. 今、大使お二方からのお答えはいかがでしたでしょうか。
はい、ありがとうございました。非常に分かりやすかったです。今ノルウェーの大使の方からあった環境 NGO の力っていうのは私も感じていて、あと私もいろいろ研究はして学生の頃研究していて、やはり欧米は強力な環境 NGO がいっぱいある。その点において日本はやはりそういった大きな影響力を与える環境 NGO が少なくて、しかも政府の政策立案決定過程の中にアクターとして位置づけられていないというところが大きな違いかなというふうに思っていて、そういった大きな環境 NGO の力が日本にはないからこそ、都民一人一人、国民一人一人が、意識して行動していくことが重要なのかなというふうに思っています。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。さあ Q&A でもう一問ぐらいもしいらっしゃいますか。ではぜひ茶の方の方お願いできますか。申し訳ないです。これでラストの質問になってしまいます。
ノルウェーも UAE ももともと石油の国だというのをお伺いしました。まずノルウェーからの方なんですが、特にやっぱり産業のシフトをどうやっていくのかというの、アンモニアとかの発展を推奨するみたいな感じだったと思うんですが、あとまた海洋もガソリンを使うのでかなり石油に頼った産業となっていると思うんですよね。でまた UAE の方なんですが、都市化にすることによって石油依存をするというに対して対処するということだったんですが、また別のところで伺ったんですが、都市化の中で地下道も多いですし、また都市環境を整える上で空調も多いとお伺いしたんですよね、別のところで。そういったところで、はい、エネルギー生成の方はそうなんですけれども、エネルギーを使用する際の二酸化炭素とかはどうなっているのでしょうか。
ありがとうございます。Did both of you get a question? Okay, excellent. Then Ambassador Nihama, first of all to you.
You are quite right. Norway is an oil and gas producing country, and we are fully aware that we will become less so in the future. So that's why we're preparing for it. We strongly believe that the best way to bring about this change is to make emissions more costly. So that is why we are part of the European system to make CO2 emissions more costly in all their major applications. And at the same time, we have undertaken commitments through the Paris Agreement, which also go directly towards our own emissions. As for hydrogen and ammonia, as you might know, these are pollution-free when they're actually used. The question is how you produce hydrogen and ammonia. And you're quite right, it's not necessarily green, but it can be green if it is an energy carrier most of all. And you can produce hydrogen, fuel and ammonia from solar energy, for example, as this test plant up in Fukushima demonstrates quite beautifully. So that's green ammonia. You can also do it in a way which combining it with carbon capture and storage, which makes it blue. If it's only grey, that is produced from fossil fuels, it is of course not very environmentally friendly at all. So it all depends.
Thank you. Ambassador Al-Fahim.
So thank you very much for your question. What we try to do is we try to find ways to reduce emissions. We understand that, yes, we do produce oil and gas, but we already took a step long time back for a transition. So for us, the national oil company of the UAE, ADNOC, actually uses from January of this year 100% clean energy from solar and from nuclear. So they shifted already. Plans to also reduce carbon emissions in production by 25% by 2030. Also looking at all ways that we can find in order to reach efficiency. Because with carbon capture, and we're increasing from 800,000 tons to 5 million by 2030, again, as the ambassador mentioned, this will change it from gray to blue hydrogen when we do the carbon capture. So for us, this is a new aspect that we're working closer with Japan on. And we have to seek new ways because we understand that our climate is very harsh. We require air conditioning, but again, we're looking for better solutions. And our old cultural ways of doing things, and in terms of the houses, were actually built with a funnel where the wind will come and be channeled to go up. So this is actually being reincorporated in terms of design buildings now and going for a more sustainable way of living. So we're doing all of this while we're also transitioning from oil.
Thank you, Ambassador Fahim. Ambassador Nihama would like to add.
Yes, I just wanted to add one more example. You mentioned air conditioning, and of course, air conditioning is never very much in demand in Norway. We don't really need it. But heating, on the other hand, is a very big challenge all year round. As for the Norwegian embassy in Tokyo, it actually needs both air conditioning and heating. And it was built in 1977 when not much care was taken to reduce energy consumption for these two things. But it will be renovated starting this coming spring. It will be a 2-year renovation. And coming out of that, it will have insulation in the walls. It will have not single pane glass windows anymore, but insulated windows. And these two things alone will reduce our energy consumption by 50%, which shows you what a huge potential it is to make our building codes more sustainable.
That's very good to hear.
So,
Ambassador, you would like to add to?
No, just to mention this. So, if the ambassador just mentioned that we will do a renovation in this, but she said by doing this we will reduce emissions by 50%. So it's only insulation. So this is what we need to do to people. Explain exactly what's the impact. Even if it was a small difference, but there is a huge impact. So if our goal is to change people's minds, people's behavior, we have to show them what you will get in the end. Again, we're human beings. We always want to see what is it for me.
Excellent. Fine words to end this discussion with. 皆さん質問ありがとうございます。このあたりですね、最後にお三方から言葉をいただきたいと思います。ではまず奥教授、本日はいかがでしたか？
日本語で。
はい、こちらの方日本語でも大丈夫だと思います。
はい、わかりました。なんか切り替えが、頭の切り替えが難しいですが、非常に刺激的な、そして貴重な情報を私自身も今日は得ることができました。やはりとにかくできることをやるっていうことが重要なんだと、それが必ず変化をもたらすっていうところをですね、そこがやはり今日の大きなメッセージだったかなというふうに思います。本当にお二人の貴重なお話も伺えて、本当に私自身も勉強になりました。皆様いかがでしたか？よかったですか？よかったですよね。本当に今日多分オーディエンスの方は都立大の学生だけではなくてもちろん都民の方も割と幅広い年代の方もいらしているようですので、なのでグローバルに活躍するためにっていうことが大きなテーマでありますけれども、むしろ実際にその活躍の場をグローバルに求めるだけではなくて、グローバルな視野を持ってやはり人類共通の課題としてこのカーボンニュートラルの問題も捉えて、そして自分自身の立場で何ができるかを考えていただく、それがとても重要なのかなと思いました。
教授完璧なまとめありがとうございます。Thank you. I would like to have some words from both ambassadors about how they felt today with this experience and speaking in front of everybody about the environment. Then, Ambassador Nihama, first of all, you.
Well, I thought it was a great pleasure to speak to you, and to speak to such an interested public is always a pleasure, and as I started out saying, on such an important topic. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being so patient and listening all through. And do what you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, 新浜大使。では最後に、アルファヒム大使に伺いたいと思います。Up to you then, sir.
First of all, again, thank you very much for your time on a weekend. We hope we did not waste your time. I hope it's a good use of your time. One thing I really respect and appreciate of Japanese people is how committed they are. And by taking the time for something that is of your interest and coming on a weekend, this is something that always touches me touches my heart, because they are always engaged when it comes to things that make a difference. So again, thank you for your time, and I hope we can always contribute to this important relationship between our countries, and hope we can come up with solutions that will help both of us. どうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。それでは以上をもちまして東京都立大学グローバル教養講座特別編駐日大使による対談を終了とさせていただきます。新浜大使、アルファヒーム大使、そして大久教授、本日は本当にありがとうございました。